Okay, so this lesson is for Mrs. Cucci's College Now Pre-Calculus class. We are finishing lesson 3.3. We left off on page 1.11, so please open your file so that you have that open and ready to go. Okay, so the question is asking for us to determine whether 5 is a 0 of g of x, where g of x equals x to the fourth minus 26x squared plus 25. So what we're going to do is we're going to use synthetic division in order to determine whether or not that works. So I'm going to open up some paper here. And since we're determining if 5 is a 0, what we're going to do is we're going to have 5 as our value, our c value. We've got our coefficients, and again, my g of x is x to the fourth minus 26x squared plus 25. So we've got 1 as our first. Because there's no x cubed, we need that 0 as a placeholder. Negative 26, because we have no x, we need 0 as another placeholder. And then 25. Drop the 1. 5 times 1 is 5. We place it here. 0 plus 5 is 5. 5 times 5 is 25. Negative 26 plus 25 is negative 1. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. Add to get a negative 5. 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. Add to get a 0. Okay, so this is important here. How we get a 0 here? If we get a 0, since g of 5, right, is 0, then 5 is a 0 of f of x. Okay? So all we had to do is make sure that as a remainder, we got 0, and that tells us that it is indeed a 0 of the function. Okay. So the next question says determine whether I is a 0 of f of x, where f of x equals x cubed minus 3x squared plus x minus 3. So I, again, is our imaginary value. It's the same thing as the square root of negative 1. So let's give that a shot. And hopefully you remember from trig about complex numbers. Here's our function, and again, we want to know, is I a 0? Okay, so I is the value we're putting in. We're going to use our coefficients, 1, negative 3, 1, negative 3, and we're going to drop our 1. I times 1 is I, and when you add those, you get negative 3 plus I. And then we're going to do I times negative 3 plus I. We get negative 3I. And then I times I is I squared, which we know is a negative 1. Right? I squared equals negative 1. We know that. So we get negative 3I minus 1. When we add those together, we get negative 3I. I times negative 3I. I times negative 3I. We get negative 3I squared, and again, we know I squared is a negative 1, and we get 3. And then when we add that, we get a 0. So since f of I equals 0, I is a 0 of f of x. Okay? All right, so that's synthetic division. I hope you enjoyed it. I actually really like synthetic division. It's pretty simple to use, and it's quick. Okay, so let's take a look at something called the factor theorem. For a polynomial f of x, if f of c equals 0, then x minus c is a factor. And we talked about this, so we're going to kind of use this more extensively now. So we're going to say f of x is x cubed minus 3x squared minus 6x plus 8. And we want to factor it so that we could solve the equation. Okay? We want to factor it so that we can solve the equation. So, we've got our function f of x. Again, is x cubed minus 3x squared minus 6x plus 8. And we want to factor it so that we can solve f of x equals 0. Okay? Now, generally, if it had 4 terms, the first thing that would pop into my mind is factor by grouping. That doesn't work for this. Okay? So we're going to look for linear factors. We're going to try x plus 1. And now we're going to look in the next section on how we kind of choose what factors to use. But for right now, we're going to go with that x plus 1 and see what happens. So if we're using x plus 1, I know that my c value is negative 1. Okay? So we're going to put down our coefficients. We're going to drop that 1. 1 times negative 1 gives me my negative 1, and negative 4. 4, negative 2, and 2, 6. 10, sorry. 10. I have forgotten how to add. Okay, so we know that x plus 1 is not a factor because my remainder is not 0. Okay? So let's try x minus 1. So again, my c is going to be a 1. 1, negative 3, negative 6, 8. Bring down the 1. 1 times 1 is 1. Negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Negative 6 minus 2 is negative 8. 1 times negative 8, negative 8. 8 minus 8 is 0. Okay, so x minus 1 is indeed a factor. Okay, so what I can do is I can start factoring from here. I know we have x minus 1, but I also have this here. All right, remember this is your remainder, constant, x squared. So x squared minus 2x minus 8. And it always goes like that. This is always the remainder. This is always the constant, x and x squared. Okay, so moving right to left. All right, so we've got that piece factored. So my next step is to continue factoring that. Okay, so what I need to think about is, can I factor my trinomial x squared minus 2x minus 8? And I know that I can. We've got x minus 4, x plus 2. Okay, now the goal of this was to set my function equal to 0 and solve it out. And now that we have it completely factored, it's very simple to do that. So we get values of 1, 4, and negative 2. Okay, so those would be my solutions. Okay. All right, and like I said, we are going to do more practice with this, but that's the gist of how we can factor using synthetic division. All right. Okay, so please come prepared with questions, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.